It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, you know. I'm on the Morning Star Drive, you know.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's Tuesday, March 8th, and this is the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. We're on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So what is happening on this wonderful Tuesday? We've got some coronavirus updates, current news from around the world, looking into the book of Proverbs, and thoughts of the week on ministry. All right, how are you guys doing today? I hope you guys are enjoying your week thus far. Yes, Monday is finally done with. Yes, that first day is usually the hardest to get yourself back into work or school or whatever it is. But we are ready to get ourselves back into something that's going to, we have to think about this week's message constantly. And especially from 2-3 weeks ago, since he was talking about, we need to acknowledge and understand God's shimjung. And the way to acknowledge it is to keep continuously thinking about the week, the message for the week, and trying to put it into action, right? So I know that a lot of us here, we're trying to really have that conviction in our hearts to believe and love God, who's omnipotent, omniscient, almighty, all things combined. And with that in mind, we need to love him more than anything else, all right? So I hope that everyone here is putting the words into action a lot. If anything, guys, the one thing I do want to tell everyone is let's continue to build the community. In this time of distress, pandemic, all these things going on, one thing we really need to do is build a good community. So I really, really hope that you guys will, it's kind of like putting the word into action. If you don't really comment or like or do all these other different things or get involved, what happens is you're not going to see the need for a community. But when it comes down to, let's say that things start to lock down again, we have wars coming, all these other different things are happening. I realized even more how much this community matters, especially during the pandemic and lockdown. We've had a bunch of people here who've been here since the beginning. I started this podcast on 3/16. Literally 3/16. I started it, right? So right after Sunsim gave the 3/16 message, I was like, I got to do this. And I started this podcast and I recorded on the 16th and the first one came out on the 17th in the morning. So even for me, it was like during the entire pandemic, this podcast has been running. It's been gaining steam and I'm really, really grateful for all of you guys joining. But during that time, the need for a community to talk and to converse is something that's really, really important. And I hope that all of us can really get involved too. Right now, it is more and more we see that it's a bigger and bigger time to pray. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but we're starting this 116 prayer now, right? Which is like 1 a.m., 1 p.m., and 6 p.m. And I really, really hope that all of us, even if you can't do 116, but let's really understand how important the time is. Like in the past, it was just prayer condition, and then all of a sudden we have the Friday prayer nights, and then all of a sudden we have this 116 just starting out again. It shows how much this prayer is really important and how desperate the situation could be, right? We have no idea what is really happening in the background. We just don't. But we can see the result. The result is constant, like getting deeper and deeper into prayer and praying even more than we did before in the past. So I really call it to everyone here. How desperate is it? It's so desperate that in the physical world, there is a war going on, which means that in the spiritual realm, there's something happening that we don't see that we really have to look at more than anything else. All right. So I hope that all of us can spend this time properly and just really pray with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength more than anything else. Okay. All right. So, I'm just so thinking about what is actually happening, and we don't know, but we know it's serious because we see one side, but we can assume what's on the other side too. So I hope that all of us here can really be able to get ourselves to realize even more deeply of what's going on. Okay. There will be a new talk on Thursday night for the Espresso with Sky podcast, Espresso with Sky YouTube channel. And for you, those of you guys in Asia, it'll be Friday morning. But for us, it's going to be Thursday afternoon. But also tonight, for a lot of us. Well, it'll be Wednesday. It'll be Tuesday morning for you guys in Asia. There's going to be another YouTube short, kind of a short clip from my videos that will help people to kind of get just key points more than anything else. And that's going to come out later today, right? Or tomorrow morning for you guys over there. All right. So I hope you guys can really help out and contribute to that. Remember, everyone, on the Sunday edition this week, we have Wei Chi from Singapore. Thank you guys for just really supporting and listening to all the testimonies out there. Great interview, learning about her journey into this history. So it's fun, insightful, and I hope you guys really enjoy it more than anything else. So make sure to check out the Sunday edition this week. All right. So let's get this show started. All right. So who is today's featured artist of the day? On this very amazing and awesome Tuesday, it's going to be Xeniac from the Paper Music Associates in Korea. And this is going to be a self-titled song called Xeniac. All right, so let's listen to that one first. And then we'll go to Justar Aiden Verity from New Zealand with I Get Excited. And that's her latest single. Well, Chrome is her latest, I believe. Yeah, Chrome is the latest. But this is the one that came out also this year, I Get Excited. And she did do an artist series on this also, so go ahead, check that one too. And then, of course, last but not least, we'll break things down with the Somni Boys from America with the song Better.
오랜 시간이 지나 깨어났는데 바람의 온도가 비어갈 때 난 죽음을 잊어버렸다. 기억 속 그녀의 마지막 한마디를 미련 없이 바다에 내주었다. 누구도 이해하지
day. It's all slog, no fun and no play. Right in this, so when I get home, we can go through one by one alone. We got Scrabble and Pluto on the shelf. You can name the game something else. We got a world all to ourselves. You know what I'm thinking, walking up to this. I get excited thinking about you, what you wanna do. I get excited, can't live without you, can't live without you. I wouldn't want to. I'm going crazy. I just can't get enough of your love drug. Excited, excited, excited. Yeah, I want you. Hey there, sunglasses, Mr. Cool. You've only got on enough for the pool. Come on in. What is fine and we can take our own sweet time. We got feelings I can't even say, that you can take me all the way. We got together, no need to rush. Oh, sorry, honey, did I make you blush? It's just I get excited thinking about you, what you wanna do. I get excited, can't live without you, can't live without you. I wouldn't want to. I'm going crazy. I must give me some more of your love drug. Excited, excited, excited. Yeah, I want you. I get excited. I get excited. Woo! I get excited, thinking about you, what you wanna do. I get excited, can't live without you, can't live without you. I wouldn't want to. I'm going crazy. I must get me some more of your love drug. Excited, excited, excited. Yeah, I want you. I get excited.
I can't believe it when I'm with you, love. I can't believe it that we even talk. I don't know how it's real. I don't know how you feel. I wish I wasn't flawed, I don't mean to. 'Cause you deserve better and you know it. But don't let me go. Please don't let me go. I'm wrong, I'm flawed. I'm not the perfect person that you want. But I'm strong, I'll make myself better for you. I know I have a lot of bad moments, but I pray you still see the good in me. Everything that I've done to get here, I got a lot of things still working, see. I know that I messed up, something I say time and time again, over and over again. Always saying that I wanna do better, I keep pushing back again, but now I'm making the effort to show you I'm making it better. Made up my mind to get it together and become perfect no matter the pressure. Okay. I know in the past that I love you way better, and now it hurts knowing that I could do better. Let's talk about this, for you deserve better. I'm wrong, I'm flawed. I'm not the perfect person that you want, but I'm strong. I'll make myself better for you. I'll overcome myself again. I'll always make myself again, again, again. I won't quit, no, no, I won't quit. I'm wrong, I'm flawed, I'm not the perfect person that you want, but I'm strong. I'll make myself better for you. Better for you. Better for you.
And that is the Sumney Boys from America with Better. Before that was Juice Star Aiden Verdi from New Zealand with I Get Excited. And of course, the featured artist of the day, that is Xeniac from PMA in Korea with the self-titled song Xeniac. All right, so let's get into today's news going on around the world. And of course, it is super important for us to understand the situation so we know what's going on all over the world and we can pray for it and see what God is doing. So let's first start off with the coronavirus updates for today. Since the beginning of the pandemic in the world, there have been 447.2 million cases with 6.02 million deaths, and that is at a 1.34% mortality rate. Top 5 countries going by daily death rates. We have Russia with 744 deaths and 79,000 cases in a single day. Indonesia jumps into second with 254 deaths at 24,000 cases. Hong Kong jumps to third with 233 deaths and 31,000 cases. Mexico in fourth with 220 deaths and 8,600 cases. And then Brazil rounds up the top 5 with 219 deaths and 15,000 cases. Over here in North America, Mexico is on top, and the U.S. is second with 183 deaths and only 4,900 cases. And then Canada, 30 deaths and 2,600 cases in a single day. And of course, these numbers are going to change over the week, and usually U.S. comes to the top by Thursday. All right, so let's take a look at the news going on with the Ukraine war. And this is the thing that's the killer, right? Right now, because of the Ukraine conflict, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but gas prices are up like crazy. My dad was yelling at me today because I was warming up the car and he's like going, do you know how much gas is to leave the car on? I was like, what? It's like, for here in Canada, it's huge. It's $2.10 per liter, which is nuts. Right? I've never seen gas this high before. In America, it's probably going to hit $5, $6 a gallon. It's crazy. So petrol, gas at fresh records as oil and gas prices soar. Petrol prices have hit another record as oil and gas costs soar amid fears of a global economic shock from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Oil jumped to $139 a barrel at one point, the highest level for almost 14 years, while wholesale gas prices for next day delivery more than doubled. It came as the U.S. hinted at a ban on buying Russian energy as it looked to other countries to increase supplies. UK petrol prices, too, hit an average of 155 pence a liter. And man, that's really, really expensive. And the market turmoil is fueling concerns that the price of many everyday items from food to petrol and heating, already rising at their fastest rate for 30 years, could be pushed higher. Russia is the world's second top producer of crude oil after Saudi Arabia and supplies about a third of Europe's needs. The price of Brent crude rose by more than a fifth last week, amid fears of a reduction in Russian supplies. And after peaking at $139.13 a barrel early on Monday, the price of Brent crude, an international benchmark, fell back to $122. Now, the crisis continues to affect share markets, and the main stock exchanges in France and Germany sank more than 4% in early trading, but then recovered to stand little change on the day by early afternoon. In London, the FTSE 100 dropped more than 2% at first, but then recovered to stand 0.3% higher. And last week, the FTSE had its worst week since the start of the pandemic in March 2020. In the U.S., markets opened lower with the Dow Jones, S&P 500, and NASDAQ indexes all down nearly 1%. The price of gold, a haven in troubled times for investors looking for security, hit $2,000 an ounce for the first time in almost 18 months. On Sunday, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the Biden administration and its allies were discussing a ban on Russian oil supplies. The comments came as pressure grows on the White House and other Western nations to take tougher action against Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine. Now, a Russian oil embargo would be a major escalation in the response to the invasion of Ukraine and would potentially have a major impact on the global economy. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said Europe could not simply just shut down the use of oil and gas overnight, but that countries should move together quickly to look beyond Russia for its oil and gas supplies. On Sunday, energy giant Shell defended its decision to purchase Russian crude oil despite the invasion of Ukraine. The company said it was forced to buy oil from Russia in order to maintain timely supplies of fuel to Europe. Now, a possible ban on buying Russian oil has intensified pressure to find alternative supplies. The U.S. this week expected to press Saudi Arabia to increase crude production, and there is fresh impetus for a deal over Iran's nuclear ambitions that would lift sanctions on its oil exports. However, progress on a deal has been hampered after Russia sought a U.S. guarantee that the sanctions it faces over the Ukraine conflict will not affect its trade with Tehran. So there's the first problem from the Ukraine, and that's going to be huge, and it's hitting everyone's pockets like heavy. Now, second in the news is the Ukraine war is also causing catastrophic global food shortages. Now, how is that so? The war in Ukraine will deliver a shock to the global supply and cost of food. The boss of one of the world's biggest fertilizer companies has said, Yara International, which operates in more than 60 countries, buys considerable amounts of essential raw materials from Russia. Fertilizer prices were already high due to soaring wholesale gas prices, and Yara's boss has warned the situation could get even tougher. Russia and Ukraine are some of the biggest producers in agriculture and food globally. Russia also produces enormous amounts of nutrients like potash and phosphate, which are key ingredients in fertilizers. And fertilizers enable plants and crops to grow. So think about this. Half the world's population gets food as a result of fertilizers. And if you take the fertilizer away from the fields, the yield will drop by 50% on some crops. So after a quarter of the key ingredients used in European food production comes from Russia, right, that's going to be a huge thing. Analysts have also warned that the move would mean higher costs for farmers and lower crop yields, and that could feed through into even higher costs for food. Nutrients aren't the only factor to consider either. Huge amounts of natural gas are needed to produce ammonia, the key ingredient in nitrogen fertilizer, and Yara International relies on vast quantities of Russian gas for its European plants. Last year, it was forced to temporarily suspend production of about 40% of its capacity in Europe because of the spike in the price of wholesale gas, and other producers also cut supplies. Combined with higher shipping rates, sanctions on Belarus, which is another major potash supplier, and extreme weather, this prompted a huge jump in fertilizer prices last year, adding to a surge in food prices. The company says it's making day-to-day evaluations on how to maintain supply, and that it's too early to say if more shutdowns may be on the cards. And the acknowledgement is there is a very strong obligation to keep production running at what it describes as a critical point. So gas is going up, food shortages and food prices are going to go up, and that's these are all coming from this one war. So, but one good news is the Ukraine has arrived for third rounds of talks with Russia, and it's being reported by local news agencies that the Ukraine delegation has arrived in Belarus for the third round of talks after two previous sittings failed to make any progress towards peace. And it's understood the focus of the talks will once again be humanitarian corridors to allow Ukrainian civilians to escape from military action as heavy Russian shelling of city centers continues in the south and the east of the country. So a previous attempt to establish humanitarian corridors on Saturday collapsed when the ceasefire failed to hold, and overnight on Sunday, a new proposal from Russia was branded unacceptable by Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk after it became clear that people fleeing Kyiv would be offered safe passage to Russia's ally Belarus. while those in Kharkiv will have a corridor leading only to Russia itself. So of the 4 cities mentioned, only the smaller ones, Mariupol and Sumy, have evacuation routes that lead to other parts of Ukraine. A spokesman for Ukraine's President Zelensky called it a completely immoral story. More than 1.7 million Ukrainians have so far fled the war-torn country as the invasion continues into its 12th day. Now, we know that war is bad and war is a terrible thing. And one thing we do have to understand is I do not think it's healthy for us, especially those of us in faith, to take sides, right? And you might be thinking, what? You can't be serious. Are you on Russian side? And I'm like, no, I'm not on Russian side, but I'm also not on the Western side, because one thing I do know is there is so much politicking going on. Right? There's so much politics going on that we don't see the full picture and we don't know what's going on. So let me give an example of one thing that we don't know. Okay. Now, when the USSR, which is in the 80s, they broke up. I'm not sure when they broke up. Was it in the 80s or 90s? They broke up into small pieces, which includes the Ukraine broke off too. Belarus and all these other different countries broke off from the USSR. The Ukraine actually signed something called the Minsk Accord. Now, if you know what the Minsk Accord is, it's to protect the people in the Donbas region. And those are the groups that still want to be Russian. And there are several things that they're told, they're trying to keep the peace, not shelling them, not killing people and making sure that they're protected. But from what we've heard so far, Ukraine has actually, broke the accord over 2,000 times. Not protecting them. And Russia's been spending billions of dollars to protect Donbas for like the past 7-8 years. So there's one thing, right? So then if you think to yourself, it's like, wait a second. Oh, so the Ukraine is doing this. Another thing you guys don't understand, like if you think about what Ukraine is like too, Ukraine is not fully, they're not fully righteous either. They're in Europe, right? In that region, they're like the #1 country for sex trafficking in that area. Like in Europe, I believe. They're #1 in the world. They're not actually European though, but they're #1 in that region for sex trafficking for children, women, and men. So, we're looking at a lot of different things that are happening. We don't know. And even in the past, when you look at past recordings between like the U.S. and Ukraine, they do a lot of dealings with Ukraine, and they send a lot of like weapons over there, because even in the past, the U.S. has talked about attacking Russia from the Ukraine. They're not going to attack personally, but they're going to support Ukraine so the Ukraine attacks Russia, right? So what we need to understand is there is so much that we don't know, and especially when it comes to politics, do you really think anyone is fully innocent? Like, do you really think that, like we look at Russia, it's like, oh my gosh, they started the war, they're terrible. But then we're like, well, are they any better on the other side? And that's why the only thing that we really have to do is pray. Prayer is the ultimate thing, guys. Don't take sides. Yes, we hate war, and we're not going to say that. I'm not going to say I like war. I'm totally not saying that. We hate war. We can see all the results of this war happening right now, but there is so much happening behind the scenes we have no idea about. And guess what? After this war is over and everything is like calmed down, we're going to find out way later. But because it's so far away from what we've it's going to be so much later that we're not going to even care about it. That's what it's like. Like, and let me give you an example. When we talk about the Russia scandal with Trump, so now they just did this. They just did this huge report on the the Trump and the Russia scandal, and it comes to be all fake. And that came out recently, but no one, it's not even something that people care about. Even though that report just came out, no one cares. Which means that we spent a year and a half of his presidency trying to defend himself from the Russia thing, and people took sides. People took sides, right? They did. They said, oh my gosh, this Trump guy is terrible. But later we find out, how many years later? Like 4 years later, that it was all made up. Isn't that crazy? So this is why we don't take sides, right? At that point, you shouldn't even take Trump's side. We should have just taken a neutral stance and God, let whatever happens be, right? And we're going to see that later on, if we take sides, and we don't know the full what's going on, the only person that knows is God. And that's why we have to allow God to work more than anything else. That's why our prayers are so important, especially when it comes to this war. We want the war to stop. Well, there's no point of just taking one side or the other. There's no point in that. What we care about is just people not dying and there's no war. We care about that, right? Everything else, we leave it up to God and we pray and say, God, we got to fix this, right? And for us, especially who are spiritual, like I talked about at the beginning of the podcast, this is something bigger than just a war. It's something spiritual that's happening that's causing something physically like this to happen, right? And that's why we have to really think about this deeply, all right? So that is going on for... That is the top 3 news that's going on with the Ukraine war right now too. All right. So let's get into some sporting news right now. For the NHL National Hockey League, yes, most of us are not really into hockey. Me, I'm into the Vancouver Canucks. They are my team, and all I care about is that they make the playoffs. Right now, we are 4 points behind the playoff spot, which is Nashville. Nashville is a team that's at 66 points. We're at 62. And I'm just praying that Nashville not dies, but they keep losing and we keep winning because we're right there. We have 2 teams above us too. Like I think it's like Dallas and Anaheim. But the thing that's really crappy is both of those teams won last night. So I'm like, so we're still a 4-point gap between us and Nashville. We have 2 teams above us too. So just really 25 games left. Anything can happen during that time. In second news, we have the NBA. Some crazy statistics from last night. Boston Celtics defeat the Brooklyn Nets 126-120. Kevin Durant, he comes back again. 37 points, 6 rebounds, 8 assists in a losing effort. And then Jason Tatum, 54 points and 5 rebounds. And yesterday it was like, LeBron James 56, Tatum 54 points. Milwaukee Bucks defeat the number 1 team Phoenix Suns 132-122. Chris Middleton 44 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. And then we have Denver defeats the New Orleans Pelicans. Nikola Jokic 46 points, 12 rebounds, 11 assists, which is nuts, right? So there's a triple-double with 46 points. And then, everyone else, those were like the crazy stuff going on yesterday. Last but not least, we'll get into a little bit of some soccer news. Yesterday in EPL news, Arsenal beats Watford 3-2. Manchester City just crushes Man U 4-1. In Spain, Barcelona beats Elche 2-1. And then in Italy, Juventus defeats Spezia 1-0, and AC Milan defeats Napoli 1-0. All right, so AC Milan, they used to be like a really powerful team. And I remember in 1999, we went to go watch a game with Sun's team too, and we all went to Italy. So it brings good memories. AC Milan played Cagliari, and I believe the score was 3-2 for AC Milan. And I remember Sun's team was cheering for Cagliari because they had nice, bright uniforms. Either way. So that is the top news in sports and in the Ukraine crisis. And of course, that was the coronavirus updates for today. Which means that it's a great time for us now because it is the golden time, a time of praise and worship to the Holy Trinity. And we're going to start off with victory. We have to already think we have won, because we have the almighty, omnipotent, omniscient God with us and believe and love him, and we have won already. And then we have, we'll go to look to the Lord and only him, and then we'll end things off with the love between the Lord and I. So, as one body of the Morning Star Drive, let's spend this time giving praise, honor, and glory to the Holy Trinity.
Victory has been achieved. This history has won. Since we've received our Lord, we're sharing love and joy. This history is growing with time, more as the days pass by. This is the history of hope, providence history. Now that the rapture's fulfilled, we have fulfilled heaven's will. No greater glory exists, yesterday, now, and evermore. This history is shining so bright, more as the days pass by. Those who have not realized fade in the distant night. Victory has been achieved. This history has won. Since we've received our Lord, we're sharing love and joy. This history is growing with time, more as the days pass by. This is the history of hope, Providence history. Now that the rapture's fulfilled, we have fulfilled heaven's will. No greater glory exists, yesterday, now, and evermore. This history is shining so bright, more as the days pass by. Those who have not realized fade in the distant night. Victory has been achieved.
Now both my eyes only look to the Lord, and both my ears
As I've lived my life, I realized so deeply, even at times when harsh winds may blow, if I'm in the Lord's arms, I don't feel alone. But once I leave His arms, His warm embrace, I'm engulfed in loneliness. Each and every one of our burning hearts, God's truth and love have become one. With unyielding eternal love, the love between the Lord and I. In the darkness I will be the sun. I will shine God's light. But once I leave His arms, His warm embrace, I'm engulfed in loneliness. Each and every one of our burning hearts, God's truth and love have become one. With unyielding eternal love, the love between the Lord and I. In the darkness I will be the sun. I will shine God's light. La 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 la. The love between the Lord and I. La 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 la. I will shine God's light. With unyielding eternal love, the love between the Lord and I. In the darkness I will be the sun. I will shine God's light. With unyielding eternal love, the love between the Lord and I. In the darkness I will be the sun. I will shine God's light. I will shine God's light.
And that is the love between the Lord and I. Before that was look to the Lord and only Him, and of course, victory. All right, so let's get into the word study for today. And of course, every single Tuesday we go into the scriptures of the Bible, go into some background information, and to help us to understand what we're reading in the Bible. Okay, so first, let's start off with the book of Proverbs. Well, this week's message is from Proverbs chapter 3, verse 6, but let's kind of go into the Proverbs. So, of course, we we need to study the book of Proverbs, and this is something that I learned as a Christian, and it's, read one chapter every day, because there's 31 chapters, which means that you can read the whole book of Proverbs every single month, because there's just words of wisdom in there, right? So what we know about the book of Proverbs, it contains like brief but wise statements about how to live a godly life, right? And although the book was written in ancient Israel, its message remains applicable in the modern world. And as we study this book, we can learn wisdom that will help us draw closer to God and to deal with our situations and problems that we have every single day. Now, who wrote the book? Of course, we attribute it to Solomon, the son of King David. But we have to also understand Solomon is considered an author of many of the Proverbs, and it's best to think of the Proverbs as a library of the wisdom of the Israelites, right? So it's not just King Solomon. So some of its content is deeply spiritual, while some does not rise above the plane of worldly wisdom, but throughout it's taken for granted, right? Like the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's almost like, oh, duh, but you need to think about it, because a lot of times, even when Sunsteam tells us things like, if you forget, you will die, it's so simple, but yet we constantly need to be reminded of this too. Okay, so we don't know exactly when or where the book of Proverbs was written, but the initial compilation of Proverbs is traditionally thought to have taken place during the reign of King Solomon in Jerusalem between like 1015 and 975 BC, and it's likely that many of the Proverbs came from oral traditions that existed before Solomon's time. And also some Proverbs were added after Solomon's time too. So if you look at chapters 25 to 29, they were added in the days of King Hezekiah of Judah, okay? And it's unknown when the book reached its final form. So some distinctive features about the book of Proverbs, it was actually written as poetry. Right? It was written as poetry, and it employs many of the techniques common in Hebraic poetry. All right? So there's vivid imagery, parallelism, and other literary techniques that the Hebrews used, right? And it guides the reader in the quest for wisdom. So this is a good thing that we have to understand is the poetry we may not understand now with today's poetry, but it's from Hebrew poetry from way back then, right? So one of the introductory verses of the book expresses this central theme: a wise man will hear and will increase in learning, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Right? So the wisdom contained within the book of Proverbs covers nearly every aspect of life, and the Proverbs focus as much on the quirks of human nature as they do on the basic behavior of a righteous person and on man's proper relationship to God, right? So because the Proverbs address such varied topics, a verse in Proverbs often has no connection to the verses before or after it, right? So they could be read as standalone. But readers can find within Proverbs many passages that are simple, sometimes humorous. One of the most humorous ones is like, it's better to live on the corner of a roof than to live with a quarreling wife. It's funny, right? Some of it is profound. Some of it is very beautiful. And, like some well-known passages like tenderly describes the attributes of a righteous woman and declares that this righteous woman is far more precious than rubies, right? So we're going to see that this kind of like those distinctive features of this book. And if you look at the outline of Proverbs, it is broken down into four sections, right? The first one is Proverbs 1 to 9. And in Proverbs chapter 1 to 9, where we are in chapter 3 for this week's message, these Proverbs contain like very poetic invitation for the reader to seek after and acquire true wisdom. And they really expound on the nature of knowledge and the meaning of life and the path to success, right? So that's the book 1 of Proverbs. That's chapters 1 to 9. The second book is Proverbs 10 to 24. And these Proverbs mainly comprise of short sayings about what is right and what are wrong ways of living. And they offer practical advice about family life, controlling your anger, dangers of pride, and a number of other topics. The third book is Proverbs 25 to 29, and they speak about righteous leadership, right? The duty of the people to help the poor and the value of wisdom in daily life. And the last book is Proverbs chapter 30 and 31, and these are the words of Agur and King Lemuel and they're concluding this book, right? So Agur admonishes the reader that every word of God is pure and speaks of the dangers of hypocrisy. And King Lemuel recites the words of his mother that warn against strong drink, or getting drunk, right? And a virtuous woman is more valuable than riches of this world, and reveres the Lord if she reveres the Lord and is diligent, generous, wise, and kind. All right. So let's kind of take a look at the nature of a proverb. And I think it's something important because we're listening to Proverbs every day, right? During the pre-dawn time. So what is the nature of a proverb? So Proverbs contained are not interpreted as prophecies or or their statements about effects and results as promises. Okay, so let me give an example. Like Proverbs 10:27 says that the years of the wicked are cut short, while the righteous live long and prosper and prosperous lives. Okay, the righteous have abundant food, right? That's in chapter 10 verse 3. But the wicked will go hungry, and also. That's 13:25. And while such statements are generally true, there are enough exceptions to indicate that sometimes the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper, right? So it's not what we're saying here. The statements about this effects and results are not like promises, like 100% going to happen, because we see wicked people who are not hungry, who are rich and successful too, right? So normally the righteous and wicked receive their due on the earth. That's something that's Proverbs 11:31, but at other times reward and punishment lie beyond the grave, right? So we do see that is not like prophecies, right? So when you look at the Hebrew word translated, it's called proverb, right? Or it's also proverb is also translated as oracle or taunt, and sometimes parable. So its meaning is considerably broader than the English term. So the English term is proverb, and we know what a proverb is, but in Hebrew, the word translates into either oracle, taunt, and parable, right? So this may help explain the presence of the longer discourse in chapters 1 to 9. So most proverbs are short, compact statements that express truths about human behavior, and often there's a repetition of a word or sound that aids memorization. Okay, so in the longer section of the book, like chapters 10 to 22, most of the proverbs are 2 lines long and almost always express a contrast, right? Sometimes the writer simply makes a general observation, such as like a bribe is a charm to the one who gives it, but usually he evaluates conduct. He who hates bribes will live. Right? So many proverbs, in fact, describe the consequences of a particular action or character trait, like a wise son brings joy to his father. And since the proverbs were written primarily for instruction, often they are given in the form of commands, like do not love sleep or you will grow poor. That's a command, right? And even where the imperative form is not used, the desired action is quite clear. So a common feature of Proverbs is the use of figurative language or parables, right? So it says like cold water to a weary soul is good news from a distant land, right? Chapter 25 alone, there are 11 verses that begin with like or as. So these are like similes and metaphors, and these similes make the Proverbs more vivid and powerful. And occasionally the simile is used in a humorous or sarcastic way. Like we all know this one is like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman who shows no discretion, right? Or as a door turns on its hinges, so a sluggard turns on his bed, right? These are more humorous. And equally effective is the use of metaphors like the teaching of the wise is a fountain of life. Or the tongue that brings healing is a tree of life, and that's one we use for like the fall lesson, right? And according to Proverbs 16:24, it says, "Pleasant words are a honeycomb," and the figure of sowing and reaping is used in both a positive and a negative way. So, in order to develop a proper set of values, a number of proverbs use direct comparisons, like better a poor man whose walk is blameless than a rich man whose ways are perverse, right? This better than pattern can be seen many times over in the book of Proverbs. And and another pattern found in the book is a so-called numerical proverb, which is it's a type of saying that normally has the number 3 in the first line and 4 in the second, right? So an example for this would be Proverbs chapter 6 verse 16. Okay? And Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 says, there are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him, right? These are talking about numbers, right? That's where the first time it came out. And you'll look even further in the book of Proverbs to like chapter 30, verse 15. This is where the other numbers come out. The leech has 2 daughters. Give, give, they cry. There are 3 things that are never satisfied, 4 that never say, right? So numerical Proverbs come out a little bit later, okay? And of course, there's a repetition of entire Proverbs, right? And, you know, they kind of serve, parts of Proverbs may serve as a poetic purpose. Like a slight variation allows the writer to use the same image to make a related point, or to substitute a word or two to achieve greater clarity or a different emphasis, right? So if you look in Proverbs chapter 26, verse 4 and 5, you'll see that the same line is repeated in a seemingly contradictory way. Right? It says, do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. And then verse 5 says, answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes, right? So it's kind of using the same line, repeating it in a contradictory way, but it was designed to make 2 different points. Right? So that's kind of cool too when you look at how the Proverbs are actually made. So at times the book of Proverbs is very direct and earthy, and this is the nature of wisdom literature as it seeks like pedagogically effective ways to kind of illuminate a life situation and to guide the unwise or the people who are not yet wise yet into wise choices concerning how to shape their lives as members of the human community, and that lives under the scrutiny and the providential rule and care of the Creator, right? So that's why it's really good for us to understand the nature of a proverb. And it's kind of like Sunsim is basically receiving Proverbs from the Holy Trinity, and he is expounding on that proverb. And this is where we get our Sunday messages, Wednesday messages. And if we think about it even more deeply, we get that every single morning. And this is what the leaders are trying to do, is looking at these Proverbs and just seeing the depth of how great they really are. Okay. So I hope it's something that a lot of us will be able to understand a little bit better, and knowing that these Proverbs are really, really deep, and we need to understand them at a much, much higher level. All right. So that is the word study for today. Hope you guys really, really enjoyed that more than anything else. And I hope that this will be something that we can all understand at a much, much higher level. All right. So that is the word study on the book of Proverbs. And that means we're going to go into the song of choice for today. And it is Tuesday, so I'm going to go into a Korean song, right? And this is a song that I listened to way back in 2002 when I took my first trip in Providence to Korea. And this was during the World Cup. And what happened here is there was this cool group called Brown Eyes. It's just 2 guys, R&B singers, are really, really good. And they have this song called For You. I really like it. And hope you guys really enjoy this Korean R&B. This is Brown Eyes with For You.
다시 놓지만 내 손을 잡지 마는 너 언제든지 그렇게 다시 날 버려도 난 너라면 좋게 네 곁에 없어도 날 갖지 못해도 You know 세상 끝날 때까지 벗어날 수 없어 알고 있겠지만 For you 돌아가줘 나로 인한 사랑이 넌 더 쉬워진 것만 같아 Take on your life 너의 사랑이 끝날 때 나를 찾아 사랑도 못하잖아
And there it is. That is Brown Eyes. This is a Korean R&B soul group. They're no longer around anymore. And actually, one of the most famous singers out of the two is a guy named Naul. And he is basically, he goes to churches and he sings like praises and stuff like that too. So he's very, very faithful more than anything else. But you'll find Brown Eyes and Brown Eyed Soul. They all have like this group that they keep making together. That's all R&B style Korean music. So glad you enjoyed that. That is Brown Eyes with For You. All right. So let's get into today's thoughts of the week on ministry. And, you know, I talk a lot about the perspective of the head leaders, things that you should do, things that you shouldn't do. And it's something that's very interesting because you know, it's interesting because it's coming from my perspective as a leader, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm kind of helping helping everyone out, just like, oh, this is what a leader's mind is going through. We do make mistakes. We have these things that happen. But the thing I do want to tell you is today I want to talk about something on the other side. It's like, you know, even when I was talking about Russia and Ukraine, I kind of talked about both sides, what's going on, we don't really know. And today I want to talk more about understanding a head leader, what your perspective should be from your side as a member, because we've all been members before. And I'm going to tell you the mistakes that I've made as a member. Okay. Now, everything of what I'm going to say now is very, very dependent on the size of your church, of how you should view your head leader. All right. So you're like going, what does the size of the church mean to, well, how does that make any sense that the size of church makes a difference? And the answer is it does. It makes a huge difference how your expectations and how you perceive your head leader. So let me give you an example. I started off in small church because I was in America. Church was like 40, 50 people. And then eventually I moved to Canada and I was there for 3 years, and that's like 30 to 40 people. Oh no, 20 to 30, maybe about 30 people there. And then I went to Europe to start like pioneering churches of 3 people, 4 people, 5 people. Went down to South Africa. That was how many people? That was 4 people. So pioneering church. So those of you guys who are in a pioneering church, the expectations of the head leader basically means that it's like a small family unit and everyone does everything. There is kind of like a very, very hierarchy. There's a huge hierarchy, very top heavy, because most of the people in the pioneering church are newcomers, and there's only one leader, and everyone trusts in that one leader. Okay, so it's very interesting because that leader holds a lot more power. But it's a very, very small church, very, very family oriented, and they basically do everything. They take care of every single person. Why? Because there's like 10 people max, right? There's like 10 people maybe. You're taking care of everyone. You're doing all the messages, you're setting up, making sure that everyone has, the tech is going well, and you're doing almost every single thing inside the church because it is what you call a pioneering church. And that's probably going to be up to like 20 people, maybe even 30 people. Right? They say that a head leader can really, really take care of 30 people max, like 30. Okay. So if you keep that into mind, then when the church outgrows 30, then you know that the way that you perceive your head leader has got to change. Okay. So let's say your church moves up to 50 and 60. All right, or 40 to 50, maybe even 60, right? What happens at this point is the head leader doesn't have enough time and energy to take care of all 60 people at the same time, which means what? This is where these new mid-level leaders come in, okay? And the mid-level leaders become your head leader, right, for that department, which means that from that point on, things start to move according to these departments start to develop. Right? Of course, it doesn't mean that you can't meet your head leader, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to ever see your head leader. No, your head leader's going to be there. It's not big enough for, the head leader not to meet everyone. A head leader probably in the entire year will probably be able to meet with every single person privately, right? And you're going to be able to meet all the families, and it's still somewhat of a family atmosphere. So the expectation of the head leader is not as big, but it's a little bit different because you have these mid-level leaders, department leaders coming in, okay? Now, the place I'm going to share with you right now is because I see now a lot of churches are moving into these larger churches, like over 200, okay? And these are large, over 200, you're hitting like very special level of church. And it's in Japan, I know in Malaysia, I'm not sure about the Philippines. I think the Philippines might be about 100 and something. But as you're getting like to 100 to 200, right, you're going to start getting into these larger style churches, okay? And if you're getting, and I'm gonna kind of preface this is the larger your church gets, and I want to tell you guys this very clearly, is the change of the expectation of your head leader has to change the larger your church gets, okay? So let's just take a look at a huge church, like in the Lord's church that's like 2,500 people. If you were to meet every single person in the church, 2,500, that's more people than there are days in the year. Okay, so let's take a look at the Lord's church. And in the Lord's church, 2,500, I'm sure it's even more now. 2,500 divided by 365, which basically means you're meeting almost 7 people per day. Now, if you're meeting 7 people per day, how much work can you actually get done as a head leader if you're counseling 7 people per day? And the answer is nothing. You're not going to get anything done at all, right? So what happens is your organization, your church organization changes, and your expectation of your head leader has to change, which means if your church is like 150, getting to 200, 300, 400, your expectation should be not to go to your head leader. I'm dead serious. That should not be the first person you think about. You should never be thinking, oh, the head leader doesn't take care of me. The larger the church gets, the less you will see the head leader in a personal level. I'm dead serious, right? When the Lord's church started, that was 450 people. It took 3 years for Pastor Joan to meet 300 people. 3 years, right? Because there's so much work to be done at a higher level. You're actually, the head leader's taking care of more things, more departments, more things are happening, more problems are happening too, right? But if your expectation as a member, the larger your church gets, the less you go to your head leader. And you might think that's wrong. No, this is truth. Like, think about it. Imagine a church like, say, Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas is 46,000 people. If you're at 46,000 people, how often do you think these people actually meet Pastor Joel Osteen personally? And the answer is very few. It's so few. Oh, then that's not head leading. No, it's not about that. It's about at that point, the organizational structure of your church becomes that much more important. That's why the Lord's church right now, what happens is, like when you get to the Lord's church size, your life is not even focused on your department. It's focused on your squads and your teams, because that's how big it is. Like, imagine your squad is like 100 people. That's like a church in itself, which means your life is based around this squad, or I forget which one's the higher one. There's a squad and a team. Team's lower, right? Team's got less people. But you're spending most of your time talking to your team leaders and your squad leaders and sometimes your department leaders. Department leaders aren't in something that huge like the Lord's church. Department leaders are not that involved. They're not at every meeting. They're not meeting every single person even then, because they have like 100. Well, department leader in the Lord's church is like 500 people, 1,000 people. Right? Think about the family department. Family department has to be split into JS and BF. Why? Because the BFs are at 1,000. Right? You have the JS at like 500-600. That's bigger than any other church in all the other countries in the world, right? The way we have to have our expectations have to be calmed the larger the church gets, or else you will put unfair expectations on your head leaders. And when you start putting unfair expectations on your head leaders, then they feel burdened, and then they feel they're not doing a good job. But when you reach a high, like when you're hitting 150, 200, 300, 400 people, the focus of the head leader is going to be on the general direction, the overall running and health of the church. And their main focus is going to be on helping leadership, like department leaders and up. That's what's going to be their main focus more than anything else. Yes, they're still going to meet people who have big problems. They're still going to meet people, go to families, to meet families and stuff like that too. But imagine if you have like 500 couples, 500 families in your church, you couldn't meet all the families in a single year. It's impossible. Impossible. And this is when the department leaders become important, the squad leaders become important, the ALs become important, the head leaders become important. But we have to understand is our expectation on your head leader. If you're like, think about this, if your church is more than 30, there's no way your head leader can spend that much time on every single person. There's just not enough time. There's not. Because on top of meeting people, what else are head leaders doing? They are preparing the Sunday messages or Wednesday messages, pre-dawn messages. They have like leaders meetings, department leaders meetings. They have so many other things that are going on top of it, including admin and their personal time. And please, everyone, if I'm serious, I want to tell you guys one thing is, you should really be pushing your head leaders to have their own time off. Now, what does that mean? Like what I found is quite a contradiction in our thinking is like we think our head leaders have to work 24/7 and have to answer our texts and our phone calls. But the answer is no, they don't. You are not the most important person in a head leader's life. Why? Because it really depends from situation to situation. How do you know that your problem is not worse than someone else's problem, but you get mad at your head leaders for not answering or texting back? I think that's really unfair. And here's the thing that's even crazier. You guys are working 5 days a week and then you get the weekend off. And then when head leaders are asking you to help out with something, you're like, oh, this is my only time off. Yeah, you have a weekend. You'll get the Saturday off and we have Sunday, we go to church, right? But think about this. How many of you have thought about giving your head leaders a day off? Really? Or do you really think they should be working 7 days a week, 24/7? I think that's unfair. I tell all the head leaders, you must take a day off. Because if you just run 7 days a week, 24/7, you're going to burn out. And what's going to happen is the quality, efficiency, the productivity of your head leaders is going to constantly go down if you don't give them rest. You should push your head leaders to rest. Right? Not on Saturday and Sunday, because those are the busy days for head leaders, the weekends when everyone is out of school and out of, but give them time. Tell them, hey, you know what? Monday or Tuesday is the most, probably the day that's not the busiest, right? Or a Thursday. I don't know which day it is, but say, hey, take this time off, or give them 2 mornings or 2 afternoons. Like say, oh, we know that Mondays is leaders meeting. So Monday morning until 3 p.m., that is your break. And then Tuesday from this time to this time is your break. But they need breaks. If think about it, if you're running and working really, really hard and you also deserve a break and you have the weekend off, don't you think a head leader doing full-time needs the same type of time off? And we should be helping our head leaders not to burn out. Helping them, right? How? Number one is unrealistic expectations you put onto them. Like the complaints sometimes I hear, now that I'm not a head leader and I hear what other people complain about the head leaders, I'm like, why would you complain about that? Come on, like, can't you think about other reasons why they wouldn't answer you? Do you really think you're you're in the most dire situation and the head leader is the only person that can help when you have department leaders and all these other different people there too, right? So when I think about this, it's like we also have to manage ourselves well, and your expectation of your head leader, it's got to be constantly evolving and changing as time and as the church moves forward, right? Especially those of you in large churches, do not expect your head leader to be there for every single event. Do not expect them to counsel every single person and meet every single person. No way. It's got to change in there, right? Yeah, it should be, the larger your church gets, it would be a very special case where the head leader, you get to meet with the head leader, or your department meets the head leader. Very special case. Very special case. We're not running for a year or 2 years or 3 years. We're running this history for a marathon. And what's happening is a lot of times leaders will burn out because it's just way too much put on them. and it comes from the congregation too. There's enough pressure coming from headquarters. There's enough pressure coming from Sunsteam, right? And like when he gives a message like, why aren't you evangelizing? That's a lot of pressure. But sometimes people may feel like, leaders may feel like they're sandwiched because the headquarters, IMD and Sunsteam and all these words are coming down upon them like, what's going on? And then on top of it, your own members are pushing from the bottom and you're just sandwiched to death. And it's just a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And I do think that we have to calm our expectations of our head leaders as your church grows and as you grow. As you grow, you don't need to counsel with your head leader all the time. If you're doing well, help your head leader and help and take care of other people. Take the burden off, right? That's what we should do as we grow. As the church grow and as we grow individually, our expectations, not of your head leaders, but of yourself should change of how you start taking care of others also, right? And this is where the church becomes that much more of a family where we're supporting each other. I'm telling you guys right now, for your head leaders, give them a day off. I am dead serious about this. Do not let them burn out. You know what? You're going to see it happen where they're never going to have a day off and you're going to ask, oh, is there an official day off for the head leader? And the answer should be, yes, there should be. And you should push for it, right? And then later in the future, you're not going to wonder why is my head leader so tired? Why is my head leader like this? Oh, they're not doing a good job. Well, maybe it's because they're burning out. Not so much they're not working hard, they're burning out, right? So I hope that we can also be considerate and take care of our head leaders too, like they are our parents. Take care of them, right? If they're not doing well, take care of them. Talk to them, right? Encourage them. Pray for them. You know, can you imagine, like one time I saw there was a revelation receiver and they were all meeting with Pastor Joan and the person came to Pastor Joan and says, Pastor Joan, I am inspired to pray for you. I want to pray for you right now. And she was so inspired and moved by it because she's spending so much time praying for other people. And she has no idea when someone is praying, but everyone's pray for me, pray for me, pray for me. But finally that one person says, I'm praying for you. I'm going to pray for you right now. And she was in tears. Right? And I do believe we have to have that support for our head leaders too. It's a relationship, right? It's a relationship of like a husband and wife. And we need to support each other to do well, not just saying, support me, do what I want. Why aren't you meeting me? It should be, I support you and they support me. And it's going to happen in multiple different ways. All right. So those are my thoughts of the week on ministry right now. And I hope it's something that a lot of you guys will understand too. Okay. So that is the last segment for today's podcast. Hope you guys really enjoyed the thoughts of the week and today's Tuesday podcast. Everyone have an amazing and awesome day. And we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, you know. I'm on the Morning Star Drive, you know. I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when